You ever look at the whole global financial system and just get this feeling that something's off? Like the game is just stacked in favor of the house? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain and find out why that feeling might be a lot closer to the truth than you think.
G'day and welcome to Coin Cobber. Right, let's not waste any time. We're diving straight into the deep end to find out if the global financial game is as rigged as it feels. Let's get into it.
So, let's start with that gut feeling, shall we? That little voice in the back of your head that says, when it comes to the big money, there's one set of rules for them and a completely different set for the rest of us. It's a feeling a lot of us Aussies share, especially after some of the things we've seen right here in our own backyard.
And look, this quote says it all. This wasn't some activist or a journalist shouting from the sidelines. This was Commissioner Kenneth Hayne, the man who ran Australia's own Banking Royal Commission. He did not mince his words. He basically said the problem wasn't a few bad apples. It was the entire system, and the cause was simple: old-fashioned greed.
So yeah, let's start right here at home with what that Royal Commission actually found, because it uncovered a culture that wasn't just shocking, it was completely rotten to the core.
Just take a look at this number. $216 million. That is how much Aussie financial institutions had to pay back to over 300,000 customers for services they were charged for but never actually got. And get this, one executive tried to brush it off as just a process issue. A $200 million process issue. Right.
And this just lays out how deep the rot really went. We're not talking about dodgy fees here. We're talking about a clear pattern of exploitation. Banks were pushing unaffordable loans onto pensioners. They were using high-pressure tactics to sell insurance to people who didn't need it. At NAB, staff were literally taking cash bribes in envelopes to smash targets. ANZ overcharged almost 500,000 customers for over a decade. And then there's the really dark stuff. Westpac's systems were found to have been used for payments related to child abuse material. I mean, it just shows you the horrific real-world cost when a system fails this badly.
So you've got to ask yourself, how on earth does this happen? How does an entire industry get so laser-focused on profit that it just steamrolls its own customers? Well, it definitely helps when the referees who are supposed to be stopping you are, let's say, looking the other way.
Here in Australia, we've got what's called a Twin Peaks system. It's pretty simple, really. You've got APRA. They're the stability cop. Their main job, make sure the banks don't fall over. And you know what? From their point of view, a super profitable bank is a very stable bank, even if those profits are a bit dodgy. Then you've got ASIC, the conduct cop. Their job is to make sure the banks are playing fair with you. But the Royal Commission basically found they were a bit of a toothless tiger, preferring a quiet chat behind closed doors instead of dragging these massive banks to court.
And this is what happens when powerful industries flex their muscle. The Royal Commission's #1 top-of-the-list recommendation was crystal clear. Do not get rid of the laws that make banks lend responsibly. These laws are there to protect regular people from being buried in debt. So what happened next? The banks launched a huge lobbying campaign. And barely a year later, the government introduced a bill to scrap those exact protections. Just like that. It was a massive win for the banks and a terrible loss for the rest of us.
Okay, so let's zoom out, because this isn't just an Aussie story. The same playbook, profit over people, is happening on a massive global scale, and it's turned parts of the international financial system into a giant laundromat for the world's criminals.
And the scale is just mind-blowing. We're not talking about small mistakes. We're talking about banks enabling massive international crime. Danske Bank, for instance, had 200 billion euros, mostly from Russia, washed through just one of its small branches. BNP Paribas got hit with a $9 billion fine for doing business with sanctioned countries. And HSBC, they were fined nearly $2 billion because they willfully let Mexican drug cartels launder hundreds of millions of dollars through their accounts. It's just insane.
So how does a bank just let this happen? Well, it's not an accident. It's a business decision, a choice. One U.S. official said it perfectly about TD Bank. They prioritize growth and profit over complying with the law. At another bank, U.S. Bancorp, managers literally put hard caps on the number of suspicious activity alerts their team was allowed to investigate, not based on risk, but based on staffing levels. Then they hid it all from the regulators. The result? Crime becomes profitable, and the bank just becomes a gateway for dirty money.
And all of this leads to the biggest question of all, doesn't it? With so much crime and so much money being made from it, where's the justice? Why do we see massive fines being paid, but the people who are actually in charge seem to be completely untouchable?
So how do they get away with it? Well, a lot of the time it comes down to this thing called a deferred prosecution agreement, or DPA.
Honestly, you can just think of it as a get-out-of-jail-free card for corporations. The company basically says, yep, we did it, pays a massive fine, and in return, the prosecutors agree to drop any criminal charges. No criminal record for the company, and crucially, no executives see the inside of a jail cell. It's the very definition of a two-tiered justice system.
And this chart just shows you the result in black and white. After the 2008 global financial crisis, a meltdown caused by this exact kind of behavior, banks paid out hundreds of billions of dollars in fines. Billions! And the number of senior bank executives who went to jail for their role in it all, a big fat zero, not a single one. The companies paid a fine, but the people who made the decisions just walked away.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. This isn't some wild conspiracy theory. It's a stated fact. The former U.S. Attorney General himself stood up and admitted that the sheer size of these banks makes them almost impossible to prosecute. He said prosecutors worry that actually convicting a bank of a crime could crash the entire economy. And that, right there, is the definition of too big to jail.
Right, so let's pull all these threads together. We've seen the greed here in Australia, we've seen the criminality on a global scale, so why does the system seem to not only allow this but almost encourage it?
It all comes down to this really weird paradox. The countries we think of as being the cleanest, the most stable, the least corrupt, places like Switzerland, the UK, the US, they're actually the biggest enablers of all this. And why is that? Well, because if you're a dictator or a drug lord, where do you want to park your stolen cash? You want to put it somewhere safe, somewhere with a strong rule of law. That stability is the best insurance policy money can buy. So the system's greatest strength actually becomes its biggest weakness.
And the cost of all this isn't exactly pocket change. Over the last decade alone, the bill for all this corporate financial crime has topped $350 billion. That's not just a few fines here and there. That's a systemic cost that tells you these problems are baked right into the DNA of the system itself.
So what's the bottom line here? It really boils down to three things. 1, a culture that puts profit above everything, including the law. 2, you've got weak regulators who are outgunned and outmaneuvered by powerful lobbyists, just like we saw here in Australia. And 3, there's no real punishment. These massive fines, for the banks, they're just another cost of doing business, like paying the electricity bill. It doesn't actually stop them from doing it again.
Which leaves us all with one final, pretty unsettling question. When you see the same behavior, the same lack of accountability, and the same results again and again and again, you have to ask yourself, is this really a broken system? Or is it a system that's working perfectly for the very few people it was actually designed to benefit? I'll let you be the judge of that one.
And that's all we've got time for. If this gave you something to think about, do us a favor and hit that like button. And make sure you subscribe to CoinCobber for more deep dives into the systems that run our world. Cheers for watching.